Hello, Julia, Emily and Sophie. Thank you for all your wisdom advice. A quick point that I hope you might acknowledge and address. I'm grieving a close friend of almost 4 decades. I'm learning from grief videos, podcasts, articles, and I'm seeing a counsellor, all connected with grief and trauma. It feels very isolating that in our whole cultural grief framework is built around Christianity. It's ubiquitous. Language is always passed on, or in peace, or in heaven, or prayers and angels. I'm an atheist, and none of that sentiment means anything to me. It is alien and alienating. Makes me feel unacknowledged, dismissed, and less than. I loved my friend with all of my heart, truly, but his existence has ended. He's not waiting somewhere for me. There's no future reconnection, no relationship, except for in my head. This hurts more because the podcasts and the videos and the books have no language for me. Is it possible for grief cultures to adapt and open up to include different expressions of grief?
I feel really bad that this has been this person's experience. It sounds very painful and very lonely. It's not been my experience.
If you'd waited for me to finish what I was saying, I would have said that. So what I was going to say
Back in your box, Emily.
With her glasses on.
Now, leveling up over here. No. Yeah.
What I was going to say was, I completely understand if that is her experience, but that isn't what I see. And it certainly isn't what I say or do. So I loathe all of the metaphors for death and dying, like passed on, passed away, moved,
gone to sleep.
Gone to sleep. And I've always been against them. And I've always used died. And so I completely agree with her with that. And I think there are many organizations that have lots of multicultural views about death. I mean, including Cruise, which is the biggest bereavement organization here in the UK. Certainly Child Bereavement UK. I just wonder where she's looking, on the one hand, and two, a kind of adjacent question is really deeply grieving a friend. One can feel delegitimized or disenfranchised in your grief when you're grieving a friend, because there are often primary mourners that are partners or siblings or parents. And so maybe some of that disenfranchisement is also about that. But I mean, I don't know that. And actually, I think we can love a friend as much or more than a family member if they've really been your closest friend. So I really want to legitimize the level of her grief. So what are you going to say now, Pom?
Yes. No, I mean, it's just obviously incredibly painful. I think I would also recommend finding other people who've been bereaved. So somebody we've had on the podcast is Amber Jeffries, and she has an amazing organization called the Grief Gang, and it sort of organizes different groups of what kind of bereavement you've had, but also she's got an Instagram called The Grief Gang, and it's not religious at all. It's just people who have loved people that have died. She's really, really wonderful. So I would really recommend finding her and all the things that she does. Also, GriefWorks. GriefWorks is a great resource by Julia Samuel. And I think just from a...
Can I say about Amber is that her best friend Poppy died.
Yeah, her best friend died. So she posts a lot about how much she loves her friend and misses her friend, and that really brutal experience of the death of a friend. I can only sort of speak also from my own personal experience, and I'm not religious. I think when you die, you die. And what has sort of helps me is the idea that Mum talks about a lot, which is the relationship with that person still continues. Like my love for that person and their love for me, like that feels like it's still in me, and it's nothing to do with religion. It's to do with the relationship that I had with that person. And
because you had a really great friend that died.
I had a really great friend that died. We had our nanny who lived with us for our whole lives, who died. And I, like her particularly, I see her in me when I parent. Like I'll say things that she said and they'll just sort of pop out of my mouth, or I'll like do a little like, oh, we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. And it's like Eiley is sort of there talking in me, and it's not to do with religion. It's just to do with love and a person that you know so well, who's such a big part of your life. And like that for me is a sort of a framework. That might not be helpful at all, but like, yes, there's lots of resources out there as well.
I guess one of the things maybe is answering the feeling I felt when in your question rather than the question, which with the feeling I felt was the kind of, I felt a resonance with the anger and the isolation of grief. That often grief is a deeply isolating experience where it can feel very, very much like, and often is very much like, there is no one around me who is getting this, who understands the amount of pain that I'm in, who is resonating. Everyone is carrying on with their bloody lives, worrying about unimportant things. And I am distraught. I'm in a lot of pain and I'm so on my own. And if you are in that situation and the people around you or the attempts you've made to connect have not met you, there is a fury in that of not being met, not having a language that you feel like is mutual, that you can speak about your experience and the person listening understands and can speak it back. Therefore, I'm really just echoing some of what the others said, but to find someone or someplace or a group where people can speak some of your language of grief, even if it looks in unexpected ways. Or, this is a bit sideways, not about people, but also connecting to the sort of other than human, the natural world, as a place to be met in your own language, the sort of cycles of loss and life that exist in the world, being present with beings and trees that might, where you don't get that same level of frustration of, oh, stop using the euphemism, or ritual. I suppose there's just not just words is not the only way of trying to be heard and feeling received. So I guess I'm resonating with the level of the anger and the unseen and the isolation that often comes with grief. And it's hard to, and sometimes that is just a part.
I think I may have said this many times before, but anger is a very powerful, very important part of grief. And it's the energy of separation in a way. It's the force that forces you to separate from the person that you love. But it's also, the level of it is equal to the level of the hurt. And it is better expressed if we can find a way of cleanly expressing it. But if we just vent, it tends to intensify our anger. So a sort of structure I've come up with clients is they find a way and a place, like with Sophie suggesting, like in nature, of screaming or expressing their rage, jumping in puddles, kicking in water, really releasing it. And then they return home and they journal what they feel. And then they do, say, a 5-minute breathing exercise to regulate their emotional system, their nervous system. And then they watch something funny. I mean, for me, it would be Michael McIntyre, but you could choose whatever is funny for you, because you can't be angry and laugh at the same time. And then do something that's soothing, make a cup of tea. And doing that regularly is a way of kind of safely expressing your rage that keeps you connected to yourself enough that it doesn't just go out of control. And in your expressing your rage, obviously vent about there being not enough language that fits your understanding of your loss, that as an atheist, that he's died and he hasn't gone anywhere and there isn't a heaven.
And if you have a therapist, I think you said in your question that you have a therapist, and they are using that language, I think you can express to them that's really unhelpful for you. I mean, if I was your therapist and I was using that language, which I think is unlikely that I would use that language without knowing that it was something that was resonant for you, like that is something that would be really important for me to know. And if your therapist is not able to kind of take that on board, find a different therapist.
So thank you for your question. I really can feel the level of your loss and how much you loved your friend and how big a space there is for him in you. And I hope these answers are helpful. So sending you love and thank you.